I'm with Navdeep Suri, India's former ambassador to Egypt and the UAE. He was in Egypt from 2012 to 2015 and in Abu Dhabi, the capital of the Emirates, from 2016 to 2019. Ambassador Suri is an expert on the Arab world, of course, but also has served as India's ambassador in other parts of the world, including in Australia. I'm Jyoti Malhotra with the Tribune, and this is the inaugural episode of the Tribune newsroom, which is a brand new multimedia property of the Tribune newspaper. As you know, dear viewers, the Tribune is India's oldest daily newspaper. We began in 1881. We've just celebrated 145 full years. Many of you read the newspaper, but now please do start watching us on our YouTube channel. Subscribe to our website. Tell us what you think about our work. And this, as I said, the inaugural episode of the Tribune newsroom. And today we have with us right here in the newsroom, in the Tribune newsroom, Ambassador Navdeep Suri. Welcome so much, Ambassador, to the Tribune.
Thank you very much, Jyoti. It's a pleasure to be here. And I must say it's a privilege to be the very first guest for this inaugural edition. The Tribune is associated with growing up in Amritsar. It's been part of our consciousness for at least 50 years. It's the paper that everybody in our family used to read, and I still read it every single day, the old-fashioned way in print, except when I'm traveling, and those are the times when I go online and check it out.
Thank you so much, and we're also very privileged to have you here. You're a son of Punjab, as we say. Your grandfather, Nanak Singh Ji, was a great poet, and a lot of people here remember him for that. But Ambassador, my first question to you is on the crisis in West Asia, the war between Iran, the US, and Israel. Donald Trump, he said many things these last many days, but overnight there has been a ceasefire for 2 weeks brokered by Pakistan and China and others. Your first reactions to this ceasefire, the war that has gone on for 39 days?
Thank God, or Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah, as they say in the Arab world. Because I think this has been one of the most pointless and most destructive conflicts in recent memory. It's also one that was the most blatantly illegal under any aspect of international law. There was no UN cover, there was no legal sanction for US and Israel to have attacked Iran the way they did on the 28th of February. And it's also equally illegal under the same provisions of international law for Iran to have attacked its neighboring countries in the Gulf the way it has, or now to start asserting control over the Strait of Hormuz, which is an international waterway. So at multiple levels, the last month and a bit, 40 days, have seen an utter and complete breakdown of whatever we thought was a rules-based international order, because the guys who were making the rules and trying to enforce them are the ones who have first broken them. And then we see other bits and pieces falling apart. So right now, I think what we have is a 2-week ceasefire. I hope it holds, because one key element of that ceasefire, which still remains under doubt, is that it also extends to Lebanon, according to what the Pakistani Prime Minister tweeted. But according to what Prime Minister Netanyahu from Israel has said, it does not apply to Lebanon. So I hope that does not become an excuse or a justification for bringing down the ceasefire, because I can tell you that the one country which is not happy with the ceasefire is Israel.
I see. So it's been 39 days, shall we say, exactly 39 days. On the 28th of February, Ali Khamenei, the former supreme leader of Iran, was assassinated by an American missile. Who do you think, Ambassador Suri, who has won this conflict?
At a very human level, there are usually no winners in a war. At a political level or at a strategic level, I would say that despite all the battering that Iran has suffered, it's come out on top.
You think Iran has won?
I think Iran has won at a strategic level. And the reason I say is the objectives that were articulated in a very muddled and confused way by President Trump and Rubio and Hegseth and others were at various points of time an end to Iran's nuclear program, an end to Iran's missile program, and a regime change. As on date, none of those key objectives has been achieved. The Islamic Republic is still intact, maybe under different leadership, but they're still very much, the IRGC is still ruling the place. The nuclear stockpile of 440 kilograms of highly enriched uranium is still somewhere in Iran. And Iran is showing no intention of giving up on its missile or drone programs. On the other hand, there's been a fundamental change in status quo, which is that on the 27th of February, the Strait of Hormuz was open to international traffic. It was an international waterway which enabled free access to all. I think what has happened in the 39 days is even the Americans have implicitly acknowledged Iran's control over the strait. And I think whatever transpires in the next 2 weeks as part of the negotiations, even for a country like ours, it's deeply worrying if Iran puts in a toll gate and says $2 million per every ship transiting, because at the end of the day, Indian consumers will pay the price for that. So I think but from an Iranian perspective, they are today in a strategically stronger position. And I think what they've been able to demonstrate quite unequivocally is that with the best of air power and military might, you can't fight geography. And at the end of the day, the political will of a nation, the resilience that it has displayed, can overcome the most powerful military that the world has seen.
The most powerful country in the world.
And with Israel alongside,
That's right.
which is certainly the most powerful country in the Middle East. So, two of the most powerful armies coming at you day after day, 15,000 sorties and all of that. And yet they've come out of it. So I think in my mind, there is no doubt that when you look back at this period, you will see some degree of resurgence in Iran, that we stood our ground, and for them, survival is victory.
Right.
I think you will also see this when you look back at this period as the point of time in history when the decline of a once great American civilization and power began.
You think it began with this war?
I think it has begun in 2025 with all of Trump's erratic actions on Canada, on Greenland, on all of the other stuff that we've seen. But if there's a finite point, I think this will be the point where it was demonstrated that even the greatest superpower cannot enforce its will over a much weaker country. And that's how declines begin.
But tell me, were you surprised, Ambassador? You've lived in Abu Dhabi, which is right across the Persian Gulf, or the Strait of Hormuz, if you like. And in Abu Dhabi, as well as and elsewhere in the Emirates, a lot of Iranian missiles or drones have been, have impacted some of those places. In Egypt, were you surprised that the Iranians took on the Americans in this way? And what is, in your view, what are the Arabs going to do now? What next?
Look, I think as far as the Gulf states are concerned, my understanding of the sequence of events is that in January, Foreign Minister Araghchi from Iran visited most of the Gulf capitals and delivered a message that if the Americans and the Israelis attack us this time, then we will have no option but to hit at you. Because frankly, from an Iranian perspective, the softer target is Dubai, not Tel Aviv.
That's right.
Tel Aviv is a hardened target. It's 2,000 kilometers away. It's protected by all sorts of air defense systems. Abu Dhabi and Dubai are next door.
Right
across. And one of the advantages that Iranian drones have is they can skim over the water and not be picked up by radars. So they're much harder to stop when they're flying at that low altitude. So
were you surprised?
So I think, firstly, the Iranians had telegraphed their intent and told the Gulf countries, particularly Qatar, UAE and Saudi Arabia, which have very good relations with Trump, to use their influence in Washington and say, don't do this. So I think the first wake-up call for the Gulf countries was that despite their interceding with Trump, don't do this, Trump went ahead with the war anyway. And so all of that gold-plated 747 from Qatar or the $1.2 trillion of investment promised by the Emiratis or the $800 billion of arms purchases by the Saudis, at the end of the day came to naught. The difficult situation, and I think it's not even a dilemma, it's in a sense a trilemma for them that they were left with, was we have the capacity, both UAE and Saudi certainly have the Air Force capacity, they have the top-of-the-line aircraft, etc. Should we go enter this war, or should we maintain this is not our war? Because if we enter, and this was the debate till yesterday, if we enter, as there were indications that Saudis might or the Emiratis might, what if the Americans pull out, as they indeed have? It leaves them high and dry against a large and angry neighbor. If they don't do anything, you are left with a wounded but still capable Iran, still capable of inflicting substantial damage on you. Is that your preferred solution? Or is your preferred solution, the third part of the trilemma, that we want Iran weakened by constant bombardments of its infrastructure, of its industry, of its steel manufacturing, petrochemicals, everything, to a point that it can no longer be a threat to the countries in the Gulf, but then you risk that you have then one solitary power, which is Israel, which is belligerent, which is expansionist. So which is the lesser evil for you? Is it a belligerent expansionist Israel, or is it an unstable Iran willing to lash out at its neighbors? So there are no good choices for the Gulf Arabs, and they find themselves in this position today.
But as an Indian diplomat, I mean, you've been a diplomat for 35 years or so, or perhaps more, and you've served in the US. Were you, as an Indian diplomat, surprised that the Iranians actually took on the Americans like this? You know, like you said, the world's largest military power.
I think I have no hesitation in saying that even though we expected resistance from Iran, the effectiveness with which they deployed asymmetric warfare tactics, the sophistication with which they used their drones, the lessons that they learned from having been bombed in June 2025 under Operation Midnight Hammer, their reaction at that time was send waves of 100, 200 projectiles and then see them neutralized. This time they've been far more judicious in how they use. They've actually tried to weaken the air defense systems of the opponents and then strike at weaker targets. I also believe that they had some help from the Russians and Chinese, especially from the Russians in terms of GPS and satellite data that enabled them to do the kind of precision targeting that they did. You know, when they struck the world's largest natural gas processing facility in Qatar at Ras Laffan, they have 14 trains which produce the LNG, which is 20% of the world's supply. And they struck only 2 of the 14 trains, and those 2 are owned partly by Exxon.
I see.
So I'm just saying the precision with which this targeting has been done is indicative that they were getting real-time information and intelligence from the Russians and data from satellite data from the Chinese that has enabled them to do what they have. So yes, there have been surprises for everybody, and especially for the Americans and for the Israelis. And I think Iran has put itself potentially in a position to be a much stronger regional player than it was before the 28th of February, despite the destruction.
Right. So I'm going to ask you one question and then open it up to the newsroom. The question is on India. How do you think India has played this Gulf War or this conflict? 2 days before it started, on the 28th of February, Prime Minister Modi was in Israel. Do you think that was, how do you look at that move? And in these last 39 days, what is your analysis of what India has done?
Okay, my sense is that this has not been the finest hour of Indian diplomacy. Whether it's a question of Indian diplomacy being overruled by political imperatives is something that I am not in a position to pass a judgment on. But looking at the facts objectively, I think the Prime Minister's visit to Israel, his whole embrace of Netanyahu, getting a medal from the Knesset, all of that was badly timed. And this is because we knew that a war was imminent. Everybody was preparing for it in a sense. It leaves two questions in my mind. Why go at that point? And if you did you try to use your leverage and friendship and relationship with Netanyahu to dissuade him from pursuing a course of action that has been so destructive to our national interest? Right? Here's a friendly country which has embarked unilaterally or in cahoots with the Americans on a course that has damaged our economy from being in a Goldilocks situation 3 months back. Today, our GDP forecasts have been downgraded by everybody from Moody's to Goldman Sachs to IMF, right? So we paid a real price for it. The second, I think there was zero downside to having issued an immediate message of condolence when Khamenei was killed. This is standard protocol. It doesn't cost you anything to do it. And we should have done that right away. Not only did we not do that, but we were also tardy in going to the Iranian embassy in Delhi to sign the condolence book. It happened 5 days later.
And finally, Foreign Secretary.
That Vikram Misri, the Foreign Secretary, went. The third was you had an Iranian ship that participated in Indian exercises.
Yeah, at the International Fleet Review.
At the International Fleet Review in Vizag. They were guests of the government of India. They had saluted our president. And again, the delay from our side left much to be desired. And I think that what we have seen since the October 7th attack, in particular, the terrorist attack by Hamas on Israel, while we were right in condemning the attack.
That's 2 years ago, 2023.
2023, 2.5 years ago. While we were right in condemning the attack, our subsequent actions, particularly in UN Security Council, etc., in abstaining on resolutions, etc., demonstrated a marked tilt towards Israel. On top of that, we were negotiating the FTA with America. So again, we were being very mealy-mouthed in terms of criticizing anything that might offend the Americans. So I think we've sacrificed a degree of our much wanted strategic autonomy in that first week. After that, we've been trying to claw back some of it by working with Iran on a bunch of things, by sending humanitarian assistance, but in a sense, we are trying to make up for lost ground. We shouldn't have made those mistakes in the first place.
Okay, I'm going to open this up. Vikram, would you like a question?
Hello, Mr. Suri. Yeah, my question is about Pakistan. I mean, Pakistan has suddenly come to the forefront and emerged as a key mediator. And what do you think the diplomatic gains Pakistan will make from this exercise?
Well, in the short term, they have definitely benefited. They've maintained good relations with the Iranians. They've maintained good relations with Trump. They may be transactional. They may be transient. Trump has pretty much a use and dispose policy towards friends and allies. So I don't know how long this honeymoon is going to last. But for now, definitely Pakistan its diplomacy has gained a profile. Let me say something perhaps controversial. I would resist the temptation of looking at this as a zero-sum game. that Pakistan's gain is our loss. I think whoever manages to bring this destructive war to a close, we are also beneficiaries from the ceasefire. If LNG starts flowing and LPG starts flowing and all, I think that whether it's Turkey's played a role, Egypt's played a role, Pakistan's played a key role in taking the messages back and forth. I'm okay with that because we've also benefited from the ceasefire or should benefit from the ceasefire. Longer term, I think it's going to be interesting to see whether Pakistan's temporary success is able to cover its many failures, both on the economic front and its old support for terrorist groups and so on. I think the fractures within Pakistan are much deeper. They've been able to paper over them with this spurt of fairly creative diplomacy. Don't know how long it'll last.
Hi, sir. So I'd like to ask you, what do you think the role is being played by Trump? He's not listening to his Congress, not to his judiciary, not to the United Nations, means nothing to him. So where does that leave the our world at the moment? Is there any way forward? Do you think something happening?
And also the language he uses. Is this the language of a world leader?
Yeah, I think Trump has certainly created shock and awe across the world. I think if we were dismayed by some of the comments coming out of Howard Lutnick or others at the time of our FTA discussions, the Europeans are completely shocked. The Canadians are shocked. The Brazilians are shocked. The South Africans don't know what's hit them. Think of the poor Japanese and Koreans and others. So
he accused the Japanese and the South Koreans of not helping him,
and poor Keith Starmer in London. Sometimes we have a tendency to overstate our own importance or sense of injury, but there's a pretty wounded field out there. On a more serious note, I think there are 2 or 3 things that have come forward watching what's happened in the last, only 15 months since he was sworn in as president, right? One is the old order is clearly breaking down. The transatlantic alliance that had held since 1945 seems to be breaking down. Trump is openly dismissive of NATO. He's dismissive of the Europeans. And you can see that. What Mark Carney spoke about from Canada at Davos about a concert of middle powers coming together towards shared interests, I think you may start seeing some of that happen. Certainly in Europe, those conversations between UK, France, Germany, Poland, Italy, even Canada, Australia, are beginning to take place. The meeting that UK organized, the virtual meeting on opening the Strait of Hormuz, was remarkable for the absence of the United States from the meeting. So people are talking about a -1 architecture today, right? The second thing that clearly emerges is the 2 principal beneficiaries are Russia and China. And certainly, The Economist had a lovely cover story a couple of days back showing a very satisfied Xi Jinping and with a quote from Napoleon, never interrupt an enemy when he's making a mistake. Right? So they are very happy to see what is happening. But longer term, I think, despite all the criticism of America, in many ways it was an exemplar. And I think what Trump has done so effectively and so destructively in the last 15 months, he has undermined each of the institutions that made America great.
Great again.
Previously, right? First and foremost, from Nixon Watergate onwards, people respected America because of the rule of law, that even a president could be taken down, right? The Department of Justice and the FBI had a certain aura about them. He's converted them into his private law firm for carrying out vendettas against people that he doesn't like. Second was the whole superstructure of universities and their academic freedom. Look at the way he's gone after Columbia and Harvard and all of the other things that made America great, which were a magnet for students coming and aspiring. Third, it was immigrants that made America great, right? And Indian immigrants amongst them. And when you look at his attack on immigration, you can see that as immigration dries up, it will logically lead to constriction of demand and all of that. So I think there are a bunch of different things that we can speak about, but I see this as longer term trends, and that's why I say that 2025 will mark as the beginning of the decline of America. It will take a long term to come down, but if there's a point of time in history that you will look back on, I think this is the period that you will look, that this is when it started, and it started because of all of these, and with a major milestone being the Iran war, which showed that there are limits to raw military power if it is not supplemented by soft power and other attributes that America was so good at.
Sir, I have a question. My question is that do you think the purpose of the war, the real purpose was actually to take away the enriched uranium from Iran? And also, where does this leave cities like Dubai and Abu Dhabi? Does it take the sheen of these cities as investment destinations?
So, the Israelis, and amongst the Israelis, Netanyahu specifically, has been obsessed about Iran's nuclear program for 3.5 decades. He, if you go back and check, in 1992, when he was a young member of the Knesset, in one of his early speeches, he said that Iran is barely 6 months away from making a nuclear bomb. That was 92. And then right through, there's been a pattern. There was this famous speech that he did in 2012 at the UN General Assembly, where he had a cartoon of a mullah with a bomb and that kind of thing. And again, saying Iran is on the threshold. Then when Obama signed JCPOA, the 5+1 nuclear deal with Iran in 2015, it was quite extraordinary that Netanyahu went to address a joint session of the Congress in opposition to a sitting president of the United States to make the case against the JCPOA. Right? And there's this fascinating book that I would commend to you, which is a fairly recent book called Target Tehran by 2 Israeli journalists. And it brings out how 3 successive Mossad chiefs, what are the things that they did to undermine Iran's nuclear program, from putting viruses that made the centrifuges go spin faster than designed and burnt them off, to sabotaging spare parts and power transformers, to assassinating scientists of Iran's nuclear program, but arguing that you don't need a full-on attack because the consequences will be uncertain. Finally, Netanyahu brings in a Mossad chief of his choosing, and they embark on this destructive campaign. So today, you are no closer than you were on the 27th of February. In fact, on the 26th of February, Oman's Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi went on CBS to make this very public, desperate plea, right? To say, we are so close to a deal. For the first time, Iran has agreed to zero stockpile. Give diplomacy a chance. So my own understanding is, the message to Iran and to a lot of other middle powers is, against a rampant America and Israel, your only security guarantee is a nuclear device. Why hasn't North Korea been attacked? The message will be clear. Why was Ukraine attacked by Russia? Right? So if you want to assure yourself, then you do need a nuclear device. So it doesn't help the cause of non-proliferation, etc., at all. On Dubai and Abu Dhabi, yes, they've taken a hit, definitely. But I also think that and I have many friends there, I keep speaking with them regularly, that the government has been remarkably adept at handling the crisis at two different levels. One is very sophisticated and effective multi-layered air defense systems that have managed to thwart some 92 or 93% of the projectiles that have been thrown at them. So out of 2,500, maybe you can do the numbers of what got through. And so by and large, I speak with people and they say the malls are open and there's no shortage of anything, and life is tense but continuing. The second aspect, I think for them, is the way they've gone out of their way to reassure expatriates that, you know, we are with you and you're safe. The third thing going for them is $1.3 trillion in sovereign funds between Abu Dhabi Investment Authority and Mubadala and ADQ and all of those. They have very deep pockets that can be deployed to ride this period out. At the end of the day, it's only 10 million people, of which only 1 million Emiratis, right? But, and this is a big but, tourism is one of the most fickle industries. And to the extent that tourism has collapsed, the layoffs have already started from the hospitality sector, from other related sectors, from, you know, travel industry, etc. And unless there's a revival, the first persons to feel the pinch will be Indians, because we are 40% of the country's population. And so the impact...
Of the Emirates.
Yeah, it's 4.3 million Indians in 10 million, in a population of 10 million, 10.5 million. So the impact on Indians is going to be disproportionate. On remittances, remember last year, we got $22 billion, I think, in remittances from the UAE alone. And this sustains many, many families across Kerala to Punjab. So you will see some of that impact happening. I personally think that if what happens in the next 2 weeks is crucial. If the ceasefire translates into a durable peace, and I choose my words carefully, then the impact on Dubai, Abu Dhabi may be transient. They still have a lot going for them. But if the instability continues, then it will scare away capital. Particularly, it will reverse the trend of many Brits and Australians and people from Hong Kong and Singapore moving to Dubai with capital and talent. You know, our people are still mostly there and they won't leave unless they get jobless. But the first to leave out were the white guys because their countries issued the advisories that it is no longer safe for you. So I think that's the trend that we will be watching.
जी सूरी जी, मेरा प्रश्न आपसे ये है कि कल मंगलवार की रात को ट्रुथ पे ट्रंप ने लिखा कि एक सभ्यता का नष्ट होने वाली है, खत्म हो जाएगी, इस तरह की पूरी दुनिया डरी हुई थी और सुबह होते ही पता लगता है कि समझौता हो गया है। तो ये क्या चरम बिंदु क्या था, किस स्तर पे इस समझौते पे हुआ, पाकिस्तान की भूमिका रही है या उसमें ओमान की भूमिका रही है, कैसे हुआ है समझौता?
इस बार ओमान की नहीं रही, पहली 2 बार रही थी, लेकिन दोनों बार जब बातचीत चल रही थी तो अमेरिका ने बम गिराकर बातचीत को नष्ट कर दिया, खत्म कर दिया। इस बार भूमिका रही है ज़्यादा तुर्की, मिस्र और पाकिस्तान की, और ख़ास करके पाकिस्तान क्योंकि बिल्कुल पड़ोसी देश है तो उनके लिए मैसेजेस वगैरह ले जाना, बातचीत करना आसान था। जो सभ्यता को नष्ट करने की बात, तो मैं यही कहूँगा कि इसमें लोग 2 तत्व निकाल सकते हैं। एक ये कि ट्रंप साहब कुछ भी बोल देते हैं जो मन में आए, और उस पर भी आपके पास काफ़ी एविडेंस है। लेकिन दूसरी जो कई सीरियस जो वहाँ के एनालिस्ट हैं, उन्होंने इसमें ये पढ़ा कि क्या इसका ये मतलब है कि अमेरिका अब न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स इस्तेमाल करने के लिए तैयार है, या कम से कम टैक्टिकल न्यूक्लियर वेपन जो छोटे साइज़ के होते हैं, कहीं वो तो नहीं यूज़ करेगा। जब वो सिविलाइजेशन ख़त्म करने की बात कर रहे हैं तो क्या इसका ये मतलब निकाला जा सकता है? और इसके बारे में एक बड़े उनके ट्रंप साहब के बड़े फेवरेट टॉक शो होस्ट हैं मार्क लेविन, उन्होंने अपने प्रोग्राम में बोला था कि हमें ये नहीं करना, अगर हमने स्ट्रेट ऑफ हॉर्मुज़ खोलनी है, ये नहीं कि हम 50,000 मरीन भेज दें और वो वहाँ उनकी जानें दाव पे लगा दें। बेहतर है जैसे हमने ओकिनावा के बाद जापान पे किया था, हिरोशिमा नागासाकी में, ब्रिंग पीस थ्रू न्यूक्लियर वेपन। ये ट्रंप के और ट्रंप अक्सर कहते हैं कि मार्क लेविन की बात सुनिए। और सो कुछ लोग जैसे टकर कार्लसन ने अपनी कल के प्रोग्राम में शायद बोला यही कि इससे हम यही नतीजा निकाल सकते हैं कि ये एक थ्रेट था, लेकिन शायद अंदर से वो तैयार थे कि मैं ये कमांड दे दूंगा। और उससे फिर आगे सवाल उत्पन्न होते हैं कि क्या उनके जनरल ये कमांड मानेंगे या डिसोबे करेंगे।
Sir, what is the status of the resistance which following the death of Mahsa Amini and other such activists which had taken place in Iran? What is their status now? Are they sandwiched between these IRGC and the US war? Sir, what is their status?
So that's a really good question. I think not just the violence that and the protests that you had seen after the unfortunate and terrible killing of Mahsa Amini in custody, just for the sin of showing her hair, but the more recent protests that you had in January, which were also put down with a very heavy hand. Look, there is zero doubt that by most standards, the Islamic Republic of Iran is a regressive regime when it comes to its approach towards religion. It's a theocracy. There is no doubt that probably the majority of Iranians would like to see the back of the regime. But I think the mistake that the Israelis and by extension the Americans made is by thinking of it as a binary, of thinking that I hate the Khamenei regime, therefore I will welcome Israeli intervention. No. You can hate with equal passion the Khamenei regime and the Israeli intervention.
Right.
Right? And when a foreign adversary comes, it actually has the opposing effect of rallying under the flag. So your nationalist sentiment then becomes more powerful than your hostility to the regime in power. And this is a fundamental miscalculation, I believe, by the Israelis, thinking that if we decapitate at the top, it will bring everybody out in the crowd, in the street, and the regime will be toppled. Instead, what you're seeing is an upsurge of nationalism. But even those who came out in January, because the violence used was so brutal against them, and because the guys, whether it is the IRGC or the Basij, the guys with the guns are still around. So, you know, how many people would want to rise in protest when the Americans and Israelis are dropping bombs, and the IRGC and Basij have said that any protest will be seen as a sign of treason. And you know, there's one final point that I want to make, and I think this is insufficiently appreciated. Iranians are very smart people. They've seen what happened next door in Iraq after Saddam was toppled. 20 years of chaos, which gave birth to ISIS and all manner of extremist groups in a power vacuum, essentially, right? And I think the recognition is that even a bad government is better than no government. No government is the worst situation because of the scale on which the mayhem is unleashed. And so, you know, now of course, whatever residual, you know, people say mostly it was the Los Angeles lobby of expatriate Iranians that was putting out a lot of information, you know, trying to rouse the domestic Iranian population. But even they, after they have seen Gulistan Palace being damaged, or places in Isfahan being damaged, or power structure or bridges and so on, even they are saying, hey, we were cheering for the end of the regime, not the end of the state. We still want the country to be livable. We still have family there. So I think these are all the miscalculations that went into the subject you spoke about.
What India has gained by getting closer to Israel?
Okay. India has gained a lot from Kargil to Sindhur. Israelis have been critical in terms of providing us hardware, technology, intelligence, the works. And there's a deep appreciation in our defense and security establishment for what the Israelis have provided us. So there's a genuine sense of appreciation that when others were reluctant, Israelis were the first to come forward. There's also the 41 centers of excellence that Israelis have established across the country to help with water conservation and agriculture and so on. Plus a lot of stuff that is happening in the startup sector and so on. But the point for us to consider is there are also costs now being associated with too close an embrace of Israel. And we must keep those costs in mind. We must look at the damage that it is doing to perceptions of India being a principled country or one that stood by principles, right? My first passport, when I joined the Foreign Service, used to have a stamp not valid for South Africa and Israel.
That's right.
Right? Because we opposed apartheid and we at that time did not have diplomatic relations with Israel.
And Rhodesia.
That part is now behind us. But across the world, India had a certain moral standing. We were poor, but respected for a certain principled stand that we could take. And I think today, if we have aspirations of being the voice of the global South, then we will have to stand up occasionally, even against a friend like Israel, because what it is doing is so illegal. I'm not even saying immoral. It's also illegal. So to the extent that we have a stake in a rules-based order, then we should be willing to speak up that this is wrong. And I think we are losing out. And now my concern is that because we are the chairs of the BRICS currently, and if you look at the 5 original BRICS, Brazil, Russia, China, and South Africa are on one side, and we are on the other side, starting with Gaza and in the recent conflict as well. So I think we must be mindful of the cost that is now being associated with too close an embrace.
Ambassador Suri, good afternoon. What, according to you, is the biggest takeaway for India? What should India learn from this Iranian crisis to be better prepared for such global shocks in future?
I think all our defense establishments should be looking very, very carefully at the new style of warfare. I think we were already watching what was happening in Ukraine. But I think what Iran has demonstrated once again is that your multi-billion-dollar, super expensive platforms are no use against the kind of asymmetric warfare that you're beginning to see. And we will have to invest a lot more. I was talking to one very senior army general last week in Delhi, and he said, I would place orders today on a factory that can give me 100,000 drones in the next 6 months. Shahid or the next version of Shahid or whatever. And I would place another order for 100,000 of the counter drones that the Ukrainians are making, because clearly that's where the wars are being fought. So rather than prepare for yesterday's war, one of the key lessons is tomorrow's war, which we are witnessing already today. And this is just the starting point. I think the second thing that defense people are recognizing, and this is from the Americans, is the jointedness of satellite communications, real-time intelligence, artificial intelligence to process the real-time information that is coming to you through satellite feeds, and then use all of that to create a battlefield picture. And again, we are witnessing real time some of these things happening before us. And so we have to invest aggressively. And what people are saying is that means the old DRDO model is simply not going to be nimble enough to respond to the kind of rapid changes that you're seeing on your battlefield. But also on the economic front, I think the two things that have been exposed are our over dependence on energy resources from the Gulf. And so we will need to perhaps diversify even more aggressively. And second, we've been talking about this for a long time, and I know a little bit about this because the first agreement that we signed for a strategic petroleum reserve in Mangalore was with the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, and then the second one in Padur was also with the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, with ADNOC. So we did two, and we are doing a third in Vizag, and we plan to do a fourth in Odisha and so on. It is nowhere close to our requirement. I think we should urgently start planning to have at least 90 days worth of strategic petroleum reserves so that we do not end up in the kind of situation where we are looking at agla ship kahan se aa raha hai, kab aa raha hai, right? Look at what China has done, for example, in terms of its strategic reserves, or Japan or others. And we'll probably have to think of the same for, it's more expensive, but also for LNG.
So I wanted to ask, will Iran rebuild its stockpile? Is it in a position, or will it just give up its, aim?
$1 million question. So one is, why were the Israelis killing Iranian scientists? The first one they killed was Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, who was called the father of Iran's nuclear program, was because they realized that Iran could undo the damage or replace the damaged parts within 6 months, but it takes 3 decades or 4 decades to create a scientist of that caliber, right? But the conventional wisdom still is you can't bomb knowledge. And so the Israelis this time have done the next level, which is bomb their research institutions, bomb the universities. And again, it is trying to destroy knowledge. So I think their game is to make it much harder for Iran to rebuild its nuclear program. I think what Iran has demonstrated over 30 years, so we have a lot of historical data on this now, that it has the will and the resilience to keep trying and building again. They moved from 3% to 60%, and they could have moved from 60 to 90% and make, the 440 kilograms of 60% uranium is enough to make 10 devices. That's still around somewhere. It may be buried, but it's still around somewhere. I think Iran will want to extract major concessions if it wants to give up that stockpile. Otherwise, it will say, that's my insurance policy.
Yeah.
And that's the unfortunate thing that, by virtue of the way the Americans have acted and the Russians have acted, is that now the nuclear bomb becomes an insurance policy. So the Iranians may continue with a covert program, even though they appear on the face of it to be complying with IAEA guidelines. And I just want to make a final point that under JCPOA, they were subjected to the most intrusive inspection regime ever. There were CCTV cameras and live cameras at every point to monitor what they were doing.
And to your point, Ambassador Suri, that you cannot bomb knowledge, on this note, I'd like to say that the Tribune is always thirsty for knowledge. So thank you so much for your time, for your expertise, for coming all the way from Amritsar to Chandigarh. We're really grateful for you coming here. And to you, dear viewer, dear reader of the Tribune, thank you for watching this inaugural episode of the Tribune Newsroom. Do tell us what you think. Follow us on all our social media handles across Facebook, X, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and across the social media handles of our sister publications, the Dainik Tribune and the Punjabi Tribune. We look forward very much to hearing what you say. Thank you so much for watching.